The US loves to flex its wealth, but just past the highway billboards and stadium lights are towns where power flickers, roads collapse, and tap water might give you a parasite. These aren't edge cases. This is what happens when entire zip codes are left off the progress map. No jobs, no safety net, no headlines, just silence. And a $13,000 house no one wants. Today, we're going into the forgotten back roads of America, where the poverty looks post-apocalyptic and the real estate comes with a side of heartbreak. This isn't surface level. What they missed, you'll already know. By the end, you'll see things differently and wish you'd known this sooner. One town had hookworm cases in 2023. Another has 38 residents, no stores, and 0 functioning sewers. Think you know the worst towns in America? Let's test that theory. One of these places still gets FEMA letters addressed to current resident. And trust me, you're not ready for what's next. Choosing wrong could cost you thousands, or your sanity. Wait until you hear what's happening in Gloster, Mississippi, if you've ever heard of it. Want to make smarter decisions, or at least less disastrous ones? Hit that subscribe button. It's free therapy, plus data. Let's break it down. Number 10, Cairo, Illinois. There's a town in America where the population collapsed by more than 80%, and the streetlights still turn on every night, like they're waiting for people who never came back. Cairo sits at the dramatic confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. On paper, that's destiny. Historically, it was. River trade, railroads, factories. This place once punched way above its weight, but then the rivers shifted, the jobs left, and the exits never stopped filling. What's actually broken here? Population, from approximately 15,000 in 1920 to under 2,000 today. That's not decline, that's evacuation by economics. Property prices. Homes routinely list between $10,000 to $25,000. Some sit unsold for years. Poverty. Roughly 40% plus of residents live below the poverty line. Infrastructure. Entire blocks boarded up. Utilities still run, but for who? Employment. Major employers vanished decades ago. What nobody tells you is that replacement industries never arrived. A local once wrote on Reddit, "Cairo feels like a movie set after the crew packed up and forgot to yell cut." That's not poetic exaggeration, it's urban reality. Surprisingly, the town didn't just lose people, it lost momentum. Schools consolidated, housing projects were demolished, services thinned out until even staying felt like a statement instead of a choice. The cost of staying. Here's the irony. Cheap housing doesn't mean cheap living. When jobs are scarce and services are distant, every dollar stretches thinner. Isolation becomes expensive. Hope becomes a line item you can't afford. Yeah, you can buy a house for the price of a used Honda, but congratulations. Now your commute is unemployment and your nightlife is the sound of plywood flapping in the wind. And can we talk about the silence? Not peaceful silence, heavy silence. The kind where you hear your own footsteps echo off empty buildings like the town's judging you for being there. It's not charming. It's unsettling. Even the rivers feel like they're just passing through, which honestly might be the most honest thing about Cairo. And if you think a town disappearing is unsettling, wait until the next place where money did show up, just not for the people who lived there. Number 9, Camden, New Jersey. Camden, New Jersey, where the skyline includes Philly's billion-dollar condos, and your street might not have trash pickup. Welcome to Camden, where the American dream took a left turn, hit a pothole, and never got back up. Just across the Delaware River from downtown Philadelphia, we're talking literal walking distance, sits a city that feels like it's been trapped in an economic glitch since the 1980s. Camden is what happens when a place gets gentrification around it, but not in it. The real stats, and the stuff nobody wants to talk about. Median home price? $17,400. Not a typo. That's the Zillow price of a decent couch in Manhattan. Poverty rate? Over 36%, more than triple the national average. Unemployment? Frequently hovers around double the national rate. Violent crime rate? 5 times higher than the US average. Camden's been ranked among the most dangerous cities in America for over a decade. High school graduation rate? Barely 65%. Water quality complaints? Consistent. Infrastructure? Patchwork. Public services? Uneven at best. But then, here's the twist. Camden has seen over $2 billion in public and private investment since 2013. Corporate campuses? Police upgrades? A new waterfront park? So why are so many blocks still crumbling? Because the money came in through the front door and walked right past the people living upstairs. A Camden local once said, "We got skyscrapers, but I still have to take 2 buses to find a grocery store that's not just chips and beer." Camden's real estate is cheap, but the emotional tax is brutal. Living here means navigating underfunded schools, few medical services, and decades of broken promises. It means watching new buildings go up and realizing you weren't invited inside. And good luck getting a bank loan for that $23,000 house. You're more likely to qualify for a payday loan with 400% APR. You know it's bad when the nicest building in your zip code is owned by the same guy who closed your school for budget reasons. Camden has more cops per square mile than most war zones, but still somehow less public trash cans. How is that possible? You can get frisked 3 times on your way to buy a sandwich, but you can't find a working ATM. And don't even get me started on the roads. Driving through Camden feels like a suspension test your car didn't sign up for. If a company gets $100 million in tax breaks, should they have to hire locals? Yes? No. Only if they fix the potholes first. Let me know in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. Number 8. East St. Louis, Illinois. You know a place is in trouble when the biggest economic driver is leaving. East St. Louis isn't just a town in decline. It's what happens when American neglect becomes a blueprint. This is not the story of a city that failed. It's the story of a city that was systematically abandoned, then blamed for the fallout. Right across the Mississippi River from the Gateway Arch, that shiny national monument, is a city where life expectancy is up to 10 years lower than the US average. Yeah, welcome to the forgotten basement of the American dream. Let's start with some numbers that feel like satire but aren't. Median home price? Around $18,000, which sounds like a steal until you realize some of the homes literally don't have walls. Poverty rate? Over 43%, one of the highest in the country. Unemployment? It's not just high, it's generational. Violent crime rate? Frequently ranked in the top 5 most dangerous cities in America. Some years, number 1. Infrastructure? Think post-apocalyptic, with better graffiti. There are entire neighborhoods without reliable running water, functional streetlights, or even trash pickup. And the kicker? You can see the St. Louis skyline glittering in the distance, like a cruel joke from across the river. So close to million-dollar condos, but you can't get a pothole filled without summoning a city council seance. Let's talk about how East St. Louis got here. Short version, racism, corruption, and redlining had a 3-way and left the kid with the bill. This city was once a thriving industrial hub, steel, rail, jobs. But when white flight hit and industries bailed in the 60s and 70s, so did the tax base. That's when the state came in, not to help, but to take over. Illinois has overseen East St. Louis's finances for decades, which sounds responsible until you realize basic services like policing, schooling, and sanitation are still stuck in the 80s, and not in a retro cool way. And here's the part that deserves more national outrage. The state actively manages the city budget, but public schools have had buildings with mushroom growth. Yes, mushrooms inside the school. Fixing it? That's not in the budget. And yet, every few years, some politician parachutes in with a revitalization plan that feels more like a TED Talk than an action item. The cost of living here, emotionally and otherwise. You think the house is cheap, but here's what you're actually paying for. Safety? Nope. Stability? Don't bet on it. Services? Only if you're the National Guard. Residents describe living in East St. Louis like playing survival mode on a map someone forgot to finish coding. There are still blocks where entire rows of houses are gutted, fire-scorched, or half-sunk from years of flooding and no mitigation. And can we talk about the roads? It's like the asphalt has PTSD. I drove 3 blocks and felt like my spine aged a decade. One time, I saw a car avoid a pothole by driving onto the sidewalk, and that was the safe option. Also, who decided the best way to light intersections was a single flickering bulb taped to a leaning pole? Was that in the revitalization brochure? Picture waking up to silence, not peace, but emptiness. Sirens echo off the hollow shells of old homes. You walk 2 blocks to the nearest store. It's a liquor store. Behind bulletproof glass, the cashier nods. The streetlights flicker in daylight. Welcome home. Also, side note, how are there more stray dogs than working fire hydrants? I counted. It's close. Remember Camden? At least they had corporate offices pretending to help. East St. Louis can't even get a good PR scandal. Number 7. Selma, Alabama. Selma helped change the course of American history. Therefore, you'd think America would have shown up for Selma afterward. It didn't. Selma is one of the most important cities in US history. The Edmund Pettus Bridge is in textbooks, documentaries, murals, and speeches. But what nobody tells you is that once the cameras left, the investment left with them. This is what happens when a place becomes a symbol instead of a priority. The reality behind the legacy. Let's ground this this in numbers, because nostalgia doesn't fix potholes. Median home price, around $22,000 to $25,000. Yes, you can buy history for the price of a used pickup. Poverty rate, roughly 38 to 40% of residents live below the poverty line. Unemployment, consistently above the national average with limited private sector jobs. Population trend, down more than 25% since the 1960s. Health access, one main hospital serving the area, and even that's been financially unstable. Selma isn't violent in the way people expect. The real threat here isn't crime, it's stagnation. The slow grind of watching young people leave because opportunity already did. A local posted online, "People come here to see the bridge, then ask where everyone went." That question answers itself. Turns out you can't pay rent with historical significance. Weird system we've built. When history replaces policy. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Selma gets remembered instead of funded. Federal and state governments love commemorating the past here. Plaques, reenactments, anniversaries. But when it comes to infrastructure, schools, healthcare, or job creation, suddenly budgets tighten. Alabama consistently ranks near the bottom nationally for education spending and healthcare access. And rural black communities like Selma feel that first and hardest. What nobody tells you is that Selma isn't underdeveloped because it lacks importance. It's underdeveloped because importance doesn't come with a line item. The city has applied for grants, pitched revitalization plans, tried tourism-based recovery, but tourism jobs don't replace manufacturing, and memory doesn't compound like capital. Living in Selma means carrying pride and frustration at the same time. Pride in what the city represents, frustration in what it's been denied. You'll find beautiful old homes, some restored, many not. Quiet streets, churches that still anchor communities, but also empty storefronts, aging infrastructure, and a sense that the future is always being discussed, just not delivered. Selma fought for voting rights. Now it's fighting for working streetlights. And let's talk about the heat. Alabama heat is not a suggestion, it's an order. Now add aging homes, spotty AC, and power bills that feel like a personal attack. You're sweating through history, literally. It's hard to romanticize anything when you're melting on a porch that hasn't been repaired since Reagan was president. It's wild that one of the safest feeling towns on this list is also one of the poorest. While cities with endless money still can't buy stability, Selma didn't lose its soul. It lost follow-through. America took the lesson and left the teacher behind. And if you think a town with national importance being ignored is bad, the next place doesn't even get remembered. It just fades. That's coming up. Number 6, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Pine Bluff isn't poor because it's small. It's poor because it was useful until it wasn't. This is a city that did exactly what America asked of it. Worked the land, ran the mills, fed the factories. And when the profits dried up, Pine Bluff got the corporate version of "we'll call you." They never did. What life actually looks like in Pine Bluff. Pine Bluff sits in southeast Arkansas, right in the Delta. Flat land, hot summers. Once a manufacturing and agricultural hub. Then globalization happened, and Pine Bluff stayed. Let's get into the numbers, because vibes don't explain this kind of collapse. Median home price, around $21,000 to $24,000. Some listings dip below $15,000. Financing? Good luck. Poverty rate, roughly 30 to 33%. That's 1 in 3 people. Unemployment, regularly above the national average with limited white-collar work. Violent crime rate, about 4 to 5 times higher than the US average. Population trend, down over 25% since 2000. The people who could leave did. This isn't a place where decline is subtle. It's visible. Empty storefronts, overgrown lots where homes used to be, entire blocks that feel paused mid-sentence. You know it's bad when Zillow says great potential and doesn't even pretend what kind. Here's where Pine Bluff gets stuck in the loop. Arkansas is consistently near the bottom nationally in education funding, healthcare access, and public infrastructure spending. Pine Bluff, being poorer and majority black, gets hit hardest. The city has cycled through revitalization plans for decades, task forces, committees, vision statements with sunsets on the cover, but little sustained capital. And here's the quiet part. Most state-level economic development money in Arkansas flows toward northwest Arkansas, Bentonville, Fayetteville, places already doing fine. Pine Bluff doesn't get triage. mirage. It gets thoughts and prayers in spreadsheet form. Federal aid? Often tied to crime reduction or prisons, not job creation, which leads to the weird irony that one of the more stable employers nearby is the correctional system. That's not development, that's containment. Yes, housing is cheap, but cheap housing in Pine Bluff comes bundled with trade-offs. Fewer employers, limited healthcare options, schools that struggle with funding and retention, insurance rates that don't care how low your mortgage is. People don't leave Pine Bluff because they hate it. They leave because staying requires endurance, not ambition. A local once wrote, "It's not dangerous every day, it's just heavy, like the town knows what it lost." That's the most accurate description I've heard. Pine Bluff is one of those places where the cost of living is low, but the cost of getting out is high. Also, Arkansas heat deserves its own apology letter. Pine Bluff summers feel personal. You walk outside and the air just sits on you. No breeze, no mercy. Add aging houses, questionable insulation, and power bills that spike like they're offended by your existence. Suddenly, that $23,000 house starts charging interest in sweat. Imagine sitting on a quiet porch at dusk. Cicadas buzzing, no traffic, the air's thick. It's calm, almost peaceful. Then you check your phone. No new job listings. The nearest specialist doctor is an hour away. And you realize calm isn't the same thing as secure. Pine Bluff didn't fail the system. The system finished using Pine Bluff. It's not chaos here. It's erosion. Slow, predictable, policy-shaped. Number 5. Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown has survived 3 floods, 1 factory exodus, and a tourism economy built on trauma. And somehow it's still standing. Barely, but standing. Welcome to Johnstown, Pennsylvania, where the American dream got waterlogged in 1889, gentrification missed the memo, and homes now sell for less than a used snowblower. What's really going on in Johnstown? Let's cut through the sentimentality. Yes, the city survived disasters, but the slowest, cruelest disaster? Neglect. The stats tell the story. Median home price? Around $22,000, with many listings dipping under $15,000. Population loss? From 60,000 plus in the 1950s to just over 18,000 today. Poverty rate? Over 35%, with child poverty around 40%. Unemployment? Frequently higher than national average with limited job growth. Crime rate? Lower than Pine Bluff, but still higher than the national average, particularly property crimes. The steel industry collapse hit Johnstown like a wrecking ball made of pink slips. The city never really recovered. What's left now feels like a museum to loss. Beautiful hills, rusted bridges, an eerie quiet that feels cinematic, but not in a fun way. Let's talk about how Johnstown keeps getting left out of the fix-it list. After the infamous 1889 flood, which killed over 2,000 people, the city became a national symbol for rebuilding. Fast forward a century, and Johnstown's flooding is still an issue. But now the water comes slower, and so does the help. Federal aid? Piecemeal. State investment? Sporadic. Economic planning? Mostly PowerPoints and press conferences. Johnstown is part of the Appalachian Regional Commission, a government program designed to boost struggling regions. It sounds great, until you realize most of the ARC's funding ends up in politically shinier spots. The kind of towns with Instagrammable main streets and fewer collapsing bridges. Meanwhile, Johnstown gets stuck with Band-Aid grants and pilot programs that rarely scale. What it actually feels like to live there. Living in Johnstown is like dating someone who's still not over their ex. The steel boom. You hear about it constantly. How great it used to be. How everyone used to have jobs. How the downtown used to have stores. Now, it's thrift shops, dollar stores, and empty buildings with real estate signs that look sun-faded enough to be artifacts. Reddit quote from a local: "We don't lock our doors. Not because it's safe, but because nobody wants to steal your 2002 Ford Taurus anyway." You know things are rough when your town's biggest tourist attraction is a museum about how everything got wiped out. Okay, and why is it always gray? Like, who dimmed the sunlight in western Pennsylvania? I'm convinced Johnstown has a deal with the clouds. It's not just overcast, it's existentially overcast. Like, even the sky is thinking, yeah, not today. You want seasonal depression in July? Come through. Picture standing on a bridge at dusk. The air is still, the water's high. You hear the faint echo of a train, but no city noise. The buildings around you? Mostly empty. You feel like you're walking through history, because you kind of are, but history's not paying the bills. San Diego gets sunshine and biotech. Johnstown gets flooding and nostalgia. Guess which one gets infrastructure funding? You just sat through flood metaphors and Rust Belt sarcasm. You earned that like, or at least a pity click. If you ever wake up thinking, maybe I could move to a $12,000 house in rural America, you'll want me here to talk you out of it, or at least roast the foundation. Number 4. Marianna, Arkansas. Marianna, Arkansas is the kind of place where even the soul food gave up. A town once famous for barbecue that made national best of lists now has more boarded buildings than working stoplights. Yes, really. What's really happening in Marianna? Tucked deep in the Arkansas Delta, Marianna has a quiet southern charm and an economic crisis no one wants to talk about. Let's hit you with the numbers that matter. Median home price, $17,000 to $23,000. That's not affordable. That's an SOS. Poverty rate, over 45%, one of the highest in the nation. Median household income, around $22,000, less than half the US average. Unemployment, hovering around double the national rate. Crime, moderate compared to some others on this list, but theft and property crime are common. It's the kind of place where opportunity didn't just leave, it shut off the lights, took the BBQ, and didn't even bother to lie about coming back. You know it's bad when the best thing to do in town is drive somewhere else, delivered with a smile, but it stings. You can buy a house in Marianna for less than the price of an iPhone. But good luck getting cell service to use it. Marianna isn't just broke, it's structurally abandoned. Here's what we mean. Arkansas ranks near the bottom in public health, education funding, and infrastructure investment. That's not just bad luck, that's budget choices stacked over decades. Federal attention? Barely. State support? Mostly performative. Even revitalization zones skip over places like Marianna in favor of towns closer to highways or political donor bases. And let's not forget, this is the seat of Lee County, which ranks as one of the poorest counties in the entire US and has been for decades. One of the only notable investments? Prison jobs. Because in places like Marianna, incarceration often gets more attention than education. The emotional price of living cheap. Yes, you can buy a house here for under $20,000. But what are you buying into? Broken roads, aging infrastructure, grocery stores that carry more soda than produce, an economy running on fumes and faith. You're not just moving into a house, you're moving into a place that the system quietly decided wasn't worth saving, but didn't bother to tell the people still living there. Let's talk about the mosquitoes. Delta, Arkansas in the summer? It's a blood sport. You're not enjoying the porch, you're part of the buffet. Add 95-degree heat, constant humidity, and power grids that weren't built for modern AC units, and suddenly that cheap house starts to feel like a steamy trap box from a Saw movie, only with fewer amenities. It's wild that one of the poorest towns in America used to serve some of the best barbecue in the South, and now can't even keep a diner open. If a house is listed at $13,000 but the nearest hospital is an hour away, would you buy it? Yes? No? Only if it comes with ghost-free walls and working plumbing. Drop your delusions or dreams in the comments. We're judging either way. Number 3. Allenville, Missouri. Allenville doesn't have a downtown because the town literally got flooded out and never got put back together. Yes, you heard that right. This place is basically America's smallest official ghost town with a zip code, and it's still on the census. If you're scoring at home, population, approximately 38 people. That's not a typo, that's a bowling league. What reality looks like in Allenville? Allenville is the kind of place where the term living conditions feels like a conspiracy theory. Let's run the numbers, because weird towns deserve clear facts. Population, roughly 38 residents. Fewer people than a high school marching band. Median home price? Some homes list for under $6,000. Yes, $6,000. Infrastructure, no sewer system, limited electricity, roads you question touching with a rental car. Businesses. Imagine a ghost town, then take away the museum and add real mail delivery. Employment. Local jobs? Practically ceremonial. Allenville doesn't decline slowly, it shrinks like a wool sweater in a hot dryer. You know it's economically dead when the realtor's selling loneliness as cozy living. Gov thing on thing, when help never arrives. Here's where it gets really dark. Allenville's decline isn't from lack of beauty, it's from lack of attention. Flooding here isn't a one-off headline, it's recurrent. Repeated inundations from nearby waterways have rendered basic infrastructure unreliable. But guess what doesn't show up after the floodwaters recede? Consistent federal or state investment. Local officials have petitioned for mitigation funds. They've applied for grants. They've tried levees and drainage plans. But larger towns nearby, with bigger tax bases and louder state reps, always get priority. Allenville? It gets evaporation. Want a town where FEMA mail doesn't even land anymore? Here it is. It's easy to quote the $6,000 homes and call it cheap, but cheap doesn't cover. No consistent sewer. Electricity that blinks out like a tired Christmas tree. roads that make potholes look aspirational. Cheap here isn't freedom, it's abandonment dressed as opportunity. Allenville's real estate USP? Great price, limited earthly attachments. Let's talk about the mosquitoes. These aren't regular mosquitoes, these are Allenville mosquitoes with PhDs in annoyance. They don't just bite, they take names. You walk outside and it's like you've entered an Audrey Hepburn movie titled Breakfast at Spleen. And the only soundtrack is their buzzing, because there are no bars, no nightlife. Just your arm getting bitten like it's auditioning for a horror film. Picture stepping outside. The river's low, birds chirping, wind rustling the trees. 20 steps down the road and crickets. Literal crickets. You breathe in fresh air, then realize the nearest grocery store is a tractor ride away. Silence isn't peaceful. It's the absence of everything except yourself. It's strange. A town with fewer people than some classrooms has more land than opportunities. Meanwhile, big cities with all the jobs and broadband still choose canned coffee over community. Number 2. Whitehall, Alabama. Whitehall's sewer problem is so notorious that doctors once linked it to hookworm cases. In 2023, yeah, hookworm. Like it's 1903 and someone forgot to tell the CDC. This place isn't quirky rural. It's where infrastructure poverty went from metaphor to biology. Whitehall sits in rural Alabama, but don't let the pine forest fool you. This isn't quiet country living. The numbers are stark. Median home price, around $19,800. Sometimes lower. Poverty rate, near 40%, with a county rate even higher. Unemployment, often above the state and national averages. Hookworm outbreaks, confirmed cases in recent years tied to poor sanitation. Access to healthcare, sparse clinics, limited specialists, long travel times. This isn't cheap real estate opportunity, it's the price tag on neglect. If charm were infrastructure, Whitehall would be a megacity. Here's the ugly truth. Whitehall's sanitation crisis isn't accidental, it's structural. State and federal funds exist for rural infrastructure improvement, grants, loans, emergency relief, but rarely reach towns where every application letter bounces against low tax bases and low political clout. Whitehall's been in reports, academic papers, health journals, hazard assessments, while the toilets still back up and the roads stay spotty. Documentation does not equal intervention. That's the twist nobody tells you. Some officials call it persistent rural poverty, others call it forgotten, locals call it Thursday. Cheap homes here aren't a bargain, they're a liability discount. Sure, you can snag a 3-bedroom for the price of a used TV, but add in septic that fails, water you're not sure about, and a job market that asks, "Why are you here?" every Monday, suddenly that price looks like a participation trophy. Okay, let's talk about Walmart parking lot sociology. In Whitehall, that's your social center. You go there not to shop, but to compare cars with people you see every day. It's like a low-budget symposium on life choices. Everyone's in a pickup older than my humor algorithm. And don't get me started on the ice cream truck that shows up once a month like it's royalty. It's wild that in one American town, you're worried about coyotes at night, and in another, you're worried about what's in the water during the day. Would you buy a $19,000 house if it meant possibly encountering 1900-level sanitation issues in 2025? Absolutely! Only if utilities were included. Nope, thanks. Drop your vote in the comments. Honesty encouraged, skepticism mandatory. Number 1. Gloster, Mississippi. If America keeps pretending places like this don't exist, Gloster is the future. Just quieter, cheaper, and easier to ignore. Welcome to number 1. Not because it's the worst in every category, but because it's the clearest example of how neglect actually works. Gloster isn't dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't riot, trend, or tweet. It just fades. Gloster is a small town in southwest Mississippi, tucked near the Louisiana border. Once a timber town, then the mills closed. And when the mills left, so did the reason for being here. Here's the reality, no spin. Population around 850, down steadily for decades. Median home price, roughly $13,000 to $18,000. Some houses sell for less than a used lawn tractor. Poverty rate, close to 50%. Every other person. Job market, almost non-existent. Few local employers beyond gas stations, dollar stores, and prisons nearby. Access to services, no grocery store, no pharmacy, no dentist. Healthcare means driving. Gloster isn't unsafe in a chaotic way. It's unsafe in a structural way. If something goes wrong, health, money, weather, there's no backup plan. There's just distance. You don't worry about traffic in Gloster. You worry about whether the town still counts as a destination. Mississippi ranks near the bottom nationally in health outcomes, income, education funding, and infrastructure investment. That's the baseline. Now zoom into a rural, majority black town with a shrinking tax base. Gloster doesn't lose funding. It never had it. Federal programs technically exist for rural development, but they're competitive, paperwork heavy, and often favor towns with grant writers, matching funds, and political leverage. Gloster has none of that. Instead, the most consistent investment nearby? Correctional facilities. Not schools, not clinics, not broadband. When incarceration becomes the region's economic anchor, you're not building a future, you're managing decline. On paper, Gloster looks like a bargain. Dirt cheap houses, no traffic, quiet nights. But cheap living here means long drives for basic needs, limited emergency care, few jobs, fewer exits, and the constant math of, can I afford to stay if nothing improves? A local once said, "We don't leave because we hate it. We leave because there's nothing to grow into." That's the whole story right there. Also, Mississippi humidity deserves jail time. You step outside and the air just wraps around you like it's trying to keep you from escaping. Your shirt gives up immediately. Combine that with old houses, shaky AC, and power bills that spike like they're mad at you personally, and suddenly that $14,000 house starts charging you interest in sweat.